Hello there, I'm ahead of the curve, and in this book review I will be discussing Sigmund Freud's The Future of an Illusion. This was published in 1927. I have been wanting to review something by Sigmund Freud for a while now. I was going to review his Civilization and its Discontents a while ago, and I actually have a kind of review written out for that book. I never felt like I had enough to say about the piece, and so I read The Future of an Illusion recently. Well, actually, I technically listened to the audiobook of it on YouTube, which is probably about 2 hours long. It's really short. I thought, why not just start with this fairly controversial piece, The Future of an Illusion. So yeah, here we go. Sigmund Freud, for those of you who somehow don't know who he is at this point, was an Austrian-born psychoanalyst who revolutionized concepts such as the unconscious, and he did a lot of work in dream psychology. I'd recommend The Interpretation of Dreams by him, but it is quite dense, and I read it a few years ago now, and I lent it to somebody and they never gave it back to me, so I do want to reread that when I get it back, but who knows when I'll ever get that back. I mean, many of you who have lended books to other people before, you soon find out that most of the books that you end up lending to people, you never get back. So I guess I'll have to buy that again. Most famously, which is the reason why he's also kind of a meme nowadays, is his psychosexual theories, which I'm not really going to go into because, I don't really feel like going into that. But putting aside his psychosexual theories, he did actually contribute a great amount of things to the field of psychology. He actually made people take it seriously, which before then, it wasn't really paid attention to. Rather irritatingly, this is when the sun decides to directly assault my face. This lasts for a few minutes, and no, I'm not experiencing a divine revelation. Apologies for this technical issue. What Freud did achieve in this book, as far as I'm concerned, is expose how a major part of religious belief depends on this aspect of wishful thinking. It depends on you wanting to be in a secure existential state. And to him, that was the reason why religion could be refuted fairly easily in that regard. Thus, Freud argues that because religion is a system of wishful thinking, it provides existential comfort. He believed that this was a sign of its origin being mammalian in its emergence. The thing is with this argument, if you want to call it that, because I wouldn't really call it a good argument, I'd call it a reliable means of understanding the psychology behind belief. But I wouldn't necessarily say that just because religion is consoling, that means that God does not exist. Now, obviously, this is not the argument he's using to say that God does not exist, but Freud is saying that because it does act as a consolation, that must mean in some regard that it can be seen to be a bit petty, a bit weak of humans to seek out this spiritual means of a crutch, basically. Kind of like a child falling over and receiving a scratch on the knee. And the father goes up to the child and he offers him the consolation, the safety, the security of the father's presence, and he bandages up the wound, etc., etc. The child is the state of the human being on earth, and the father in this scenario is the deity, the God. And so Freud argues that this is the main relationship between man and God. One of Freud's main arguments, I suppose, throughout was that if something can't be verified to be untrue or true, then it can just be dropped entirely. This goes back to the very common saying that I bring up a lot, which is the Hitchens razor. Exceptional claims require exceptional evidence. Freud was very cut and dry with that sort of philosophy. So I suppose that Freud criticized these religious believers because he felt that they were too weak for life and that they needed a spiritual crutch, a sky daddy, if you will, to console them of their existential suffering. Now, I have talked about faith in many of my other videos, which I'm not going to list for you now because by this point I've done quite a few, but I'm sure you can go and check for yourself. But many of you have already seen them, I'm sure. So Many of you will know that I'm kind of in between thinking that this statement from Freud is, I suppose, valuable philosophically, because on one hand, where is the need to even accept an idea if there's no reason to accept it? You know, like if it can't be verified or denied, then, well, it's just conjecture, basically. So I am kind of in the thinking process of how valid that religious claim is, because at the end of the day, if something can't be verified or unverified, then, well, it's up in the air, really. It's difficult to determine what the answer should be, and so arguably it should be dismissed entirely. Something that Freud also said in this book was that philosophers overcomplicate their claims of spirituality or transcendence, and this creates a smokescreen to cover up how fallacious their divine claim and philosophy really is. And he says that they, which I see actually in particular these days as well, you could say Jordan Peterson does it, redefine what the word God actually is to make things much more complex and less nuanced, and therefore vague, to justify any kind of statement that follows it. Freud disliked observing things in nature, and those things in nature being called God's creation, because it's a non sequitur. Interestingly, Freud also wrote that cold science, as he puts it, doesn't really appeal to the masses, because all it is, really, is a categorization of knowledge. Indeed, many passionate scientists would disagree with Freud, but I think that he has a point nevertheless. For example, the reason why the Bible appeals to so many people, or scripture in general, is because it gives us a narrative and a purpose, a meaning to strive for. It gives us a formula of how to think and how to live, whereas science doesn't care one bit about whether you follow it or not. And I'm equivocating science with facts, because that is what it is. Science is the accumulation of observable facts. And so these cold facts, as he says, they don't appeal to the masses. Stories and narratives appeal to the masses, not cold science. In a way, religious texts offer the Humean ought to the scientific is. People seek structure, and so in this regard, people need the why, because only then can they justify the how. I think the following quote sums up his belief, and I'll show it on the screen here. Religion is a system of wishful illusions, together with a disavowal of reality, such as we find nowhere else, but in a state of blissful hallucinatory confusion. Religion's 11th commandment is, "Thou shalt not question." So yeah, I don't think this is the best rebuttal to religion and the argument of God that I've ever read. I mean, it's more of an opinion piece, I'd say. And whilst there is philosophical ideas and justifications in the piece, I wouldn't really recommend it for anybody who wants actual solid philosophical ideas or rebuttals against religion or God. But I would say it's a good place to start, to kind of first understand what it means to, the philosophy of belief, for one, which I would point you to Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling for, and perhaps this for a more militant, oppressive view. There's no doubt about it that this is an influential piece. It definitely is. But to me, there's a difference between influential and productive. So yeah, it's more of a work looking at the intrinsic motivations and psychology behind why people might want to believe in God and follow religion. If you did find this video informative or interesting, please do leave a like. It really does help out the channel. Be sure to go over and look at the description for my social media links. You will find my Goodreads account, my Instagram account, and my Patreon if you want monthly benefits from me. Thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope to see you in the next one. Arrivederci.